We as the DICES project team are very grateful that you are joining in and that you take part in this webinar, which is part of a 4-year journey. DICES is a Horizon project funded by the European Union with 10 partner organizations from across Europe. DICES, spelled out, means driving inclusive care, economic democracy, social inclusion, and social economy. Social economy organizations play a crucial role in tackling social exclusion. However, the development of social economy governance frameworks and their impact on social inclusion remains insufficiently explored. The DICES project aims to bridge this gap with a threefold objective. First, enhance understanding of Europe's social economy and identify factors driving its uneven development. Second, evaluate the role of social economy organizations in addressing social exclusion and improving services and workplaces. Third, recommend policy measures and governance frameworks to unlock the social economy's potential, including strategies for identifying and promoting best practices. This particular webinar will offer you a first glance at the work behind the upcoming DICES report, Conceptual Framework and Mapping of the Social Economy in Europe, which will be published soon. All partner organizations have contributed to this report, which was coordinated by the University of Graz. Today, Andreas Exner will speak about social economy, social inclusion, and economic democracy, a conceptual framework with care as a bridging concept. In the first part, thereby giving an introduction to the conceptual framework developed within DICES. Barbara Sack and Nasik Beichenali will spotlight Belgium, where the social economy is very much developed and where enhanced frameworks and a well-established ecosystem for the social economy exists. Regarding the mapping of the social economy in Europe, you will find 9 pre-reports in the forthcoming report. Within this webinar, we decided to narrow down and showcase one per country. Each presentation of 20 minutes will be followed by Q&A of also 20 minutes. Don't hesitate to ask your questions. You're muted, so we kindly ask you to write your questions in the chat, and we will deal with them after each presentation. So, before we jump into the first presentation, I would like to quickly introduce to you Andreas Exner, our first speaker. Andreas is working as a senior scientist at the Regional Center of Expertise, RCE, Graz-Styria, the Center for Sustainable Social Study Ecology, in political science, research, focus on sociological transformation, with a particular interest in alternative economies, including specific debates on the social economy, development, and social theory. And it's the first.
So, welcome everyone. I'm opening my slides that you hopefully see. I'll try to go to the first page. Good. So if anything is technically problematic, I ask for highlighting it by talking to me, because I see now my slides in front of my eyes. My input will be about the social economy with respect to social inclusion in a context of debates and options, perspectives of economic democracy. And the task of this input is to present you a conceptual framework linking these related but still, of course, distinct concepts by using care as kind of a bridging concept, as an overall lens, as perspective, if you like. And I realized that I should go to full screen mode. Here you see the agenda of this brief input. First of all, I will talk about the social economy, what it is, and why it is of interest for DICES and further projects and actors. It's about definition and potentials, but also about problems that lead over to questions that we like to answer in the project. Second, I will explain key ideas of economic democracy, starting from the idea of democracy being a way of life, going back to John Dewey, also relating to the strategy of re-embedding economies, which goes back to Karl Polanyi, and in relation to the concept of organizational democracy, which was, among others, further developed by Wolfgang Weber and colleagues like Christine Unterreiner, Thomas Höge, and others. And finally, I draw some preliminary conclusions regarding care and inclusion in an economic democracy perspective, and I only briefly hint to some examples. You should see the next slide, very hopefully, so if not, please interrupt me verbally. The social economy potentials that are interesting for the DICES project and for other actors are twofold. First of all, they relate in a more narrow sense to what is usually called the care sector, regarding health, education, community and social work, also unpaid work in households, of course, caring for elderly and so forth. In a broader sense, which is now the core topic or the core focus of this presentation, is the notion of caring economy. So we have these two senses, the narrow and the broad sense. The EU provides an important entry point for DICES as a Horizon project and gives us a substantive definition according to three criteria. First of all, social and/or ecological goals have priority for a respective entity, working for the collective and general interest, and it should be characterized by participatory and/or democratic procedures. And it's operationalized through so-called families pertaining to legal form and other criteria, including cooperatives, associations, foundations, mutual benefit societies, and social enterprises. Sorry. The potentials are seen by the EU and other actors, first of all, to improve labor conditions and service quality in the care sector in the narrow sense, but also in the broader sense, to function as a vector for social ecological transformation, fostering something that we could call structural inclusion, leading to a caring economy in general. There are, of course, a series of problems associated with the EU approach, helpful as it is. First of all, we could argue that the substantive definition does not entirely match the operationalization, meaning a cooperative in legal form, an enterprise having the legal form of a cooperative, is not necessarily democratic, to put it very bluntly. Further on, the concept of participation and democracy remains quite unclear, but it's crucial for the social economy, a concept that has developed in social movements emphasizing democracy. So the open questions that DICES is trying to address relate to this more narrow topic: how does the social economy perform in the care sector in terms of labor conditions, service quality? But the second question, broad question, that is now the focus, relates to the features and mechanisms of social economy in terms of a societal vector, pointing towards a perspective for all economic activities, regardless of sector. So the core question here in this presentation is: how can we understand social economy in general as a caring economy? And I present you the key propositions of the argument here in condensed form, emphasizing that democracy is really key for social movement understandings of the social economy, partly reflected in the EU definition. And it's key for a substantive reason, because democracy is absolutely necessary for articulating needs, for negotiating needs, and for collective governance. So the priority of social and/or ecological goals by necessity relates to the presence of some democratic procedure. It's the opposite, obviously, of market transactions, and it's the opposite of chains of command. But it expresses and requires collectively caring relationships that structurally anchor inclusion in various dimensions, and that put social economy principles in practice, How does that happen? Through activities that, on the one hand, produce goods and services, and on the other hand, produce social relationships, and that are democratically organized. So the social economy is prominent when social exclusion is a threat or has already happened and care has heightened importance, but there is a potential that goes beyond this so-called emergency function. It is to reduce exclusionary dynamics by structural care. And this relates to the feminist notion of care that is, of course, our background, nourishing ground, which focuses on social relationships in democratic, inclusive perspective. I have already addressed the importance of social relationships for democracy as a way of life, and by extension, economic democracy, relating to an idea developed by Karl Polanyi, or analysis actually, of the market economy, where he stressed that the market economy is fundamentally disembedded in a certain way from social relationships. And this means that disembedding means, in other terms, that exclusion is kind of the ontological baseline condition of existence in that type of society and economy. Inclusion always remains limited and precarious. It depends on money. If you don't have it, you don't have a seat at the table, simply because you're a human being. So, inclusion means to re-embed economic activities, and that requires at least a partial replacement of market transactions by social relationships within and beyond economic organizations. This is a necessary but not yet sufficient condition for structural inclusion, for building a new baseline, if you like. Obviously, democracy is required too. Here are some quotations from John Dewey that I mentioned already, that I'm not going to read. He emphasized democracy as a community activity. Actually, to summarize the last quotation, this I will read: "For democracy is a name for a life of free and enriching communion." So he draws a very tight connection between social relationships, collective relationships, and democracy in all realms of life, not only through voting for a political party in the parliament. So in Dewey's approach, we could situate two aspects of organizational democracy in organizations of all kinds. First of all, a formal aspect. Second is informal aspect. The formal aspect obviously relates to political inclusion, collective decision-making. It's going beyond what Arnstein famously has called tokenism. Can take on the form of partnership between employees and management, can take on the form of delegated power, and it can take on the form of citizen control, if you like, in terms of self-managed enterprises. So that's meant by the formal aspect of organizational democracy. Just reading the first quotation from Weber et al. It's about structurally supported workers' substantive participation, including direct or representative joint consultation, co-determination, and self-determination. And that relates to different levels of economic activities. In the long term, it relates to structural decisions, strategic decisions on a larger scale. In the short term, it relates to more processual decisions, also usually on a larger scale in tactical terms. And operationally, it concerns daily activities, often on a small scale. It's important to emphasize for DICES that not only workers, obviously, can be part of such a structure, but it's also applicable to consumers, clients, patients, stakeholders, state authorities, and so forth. And obviously, it is not only about political inclusion, but social, cultural, economic inclusion as well. Speaking to a concept of participatory democracy developed by Pateman, drawing together in a way, if you like, the two aspects. The EU definition somehow separates participation and democracy. Informally, it's very important to focus, especially in the care perspective, on something which is hard to grapple with, if you like. It's something Burkhard-Flieger has called the cooperative spirit, the cooperative ethos. It's practically decisive how such democratic structures of political inclusion operate and to which effect. So, first of all, this cooperative spirit, the disposition to listen to others, the willingness, the skills you need to negotiate needs, to seek compromise, to make conflict productive. It's practically decisive for putting people's needs up front or in the center of economic activities through the mechanism of democracy in formal terms. If this informal aspect, the cooperative spirit, is missing, lacking, a mission statement or a formal legally binding constitution will not work or will not put people's needs in the center of all activities of an entity. It's also practically decisive for the implementation of organizational democracy, of re-embedding economic activities in social relationships, because that requires to partially replace markets and a lot of organizing work, a lot of negotiation, deliberation is required for that. What is meant by partially replacing the market? I have to explain that because it's probably a bit opaque if I leave it like that. It's by merging roles that markets or the market separates. It's most obvious in the cooperative. In a housing cooperative, owners and tenants are the same group of persons. In the worker co-op, capital and labor are fused, are merged, are provided by the same group of persons. In a bank cooperative, lenders and borrowers are the same group of persons. And that creates social relationships and reduces the impact of market transactions. It's also important to recognize that these practices of inclusion related to organization democracy mutually support each other. I mean, you could say that political inclusion is the more formal aspect, that social cultural inclusion is a more informal aspect fostered by political inclusion, but also required to make political inclusion effective. You could also say that economic inclusion is more of an effect, but actually, if you think very deeply about these practices, they all support each other. I'm not going into detail, but I move over to a concept that appears to be important to capture cooperative spirit, cooperative ethos in more scientific, in more precise terms. Not reading the quotation here taken from another publication of Wolfgang Weber and collaborators, the socio-moral atmosphere that they suggest as a concept is particularly able to address aspects of communication, of teamwork, of how people actually relate to each other, regardless of formal procedures. So it's kind of operationalizing socio-cultural inclusion, if you like, that concept of socio-moral atmosphere speaking to cooperative spirit and ethos. I listed some qualities from a publication of Weber et al. So what is the socio-moral atmosphere? It's about open confrontation with conflicts. It's about reliable and constant appreciation. It's about open and free communication, participative cooperation, trust-based assignment and allocation of responsibility. It's about organizational respect for the individual. So we could say that it also circumscribes the strategic and communicative qualities of care, like transparency, appreciation, reflexivity, problem solving, responsibility and respect. And you always see the normative qualities in terms of good care, good relationships on the left, marked in orange. But you can also use that approach in an analytical way, obviously. So you have a variation captured by these dimensions. I move on, hopefully that works, yes. Now, conceptual integration. Care, as I said, is a good concept to interlink inclusion, social economy, economic democracy, drawing attention to formal and informal aspects of organizational democracy, and by extension, to economic democracy. It's about the praxis, it's about the disposition, it's about an effective disposition, basically. It's about ethics and politics, which are not separated in a care perspective. It's about everything that we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible, as Fisher and Tronto have famously suggested as a definition. So care is kind of a mechanism, a meta-praxis, if you like, of creating social relationships, maintaining them, repairing them. They always need to be repaired all the time. Otherwise, social relationships deteriorate or vanish. But that is, of course, not the whole story, because social relationships, care can be very, very exploitative. It's a core topic of course, feminist perspectives. But these phases of care that Fisher and Toronto propose, and that Toronto further developed, can help us to more precisely analyze inclusion, exclusion, and conceive of strategies. Phases of care relate to individual, bilateral relationships, if you like, and relationships between groups, in collectives, regarding colleague workers, clients, and so forth. It's first about identifying needs, caring about. Then responsibility has to be taken, caring for. Then, obviously, some work has to be done, caregiving. And then you need to listen to the response. Has a need been met with proper quality? That's called care receiving by Fisher-Tronto. It's about response, the interpretation of the care receiver. Can be a customer, can be any kind of beneficiary. Can also be a colleague with whom you collaborate. And very importantly, Toronto further developed that idea by introducing the fifth phase of care, caring with, which is about democratic organization, to allocate collectively, democratically, activities, let's say in the most generic sense. And we could interpret that actually as phases of inclusion of workers, of clients, beneficiaries of all types in economic activities. Last slide. Caring with leads us conceptually to not only to organizational democracy, but even to a broader perspective, which is usually called economic democracy. Has different levels, and that will be a topic of the next input. I just direct your attention to these different levels on the level of the organization, organizational democracy in the narrow sense, between organizations, in relation with stakeholders, including state authorities, and related to macroeconomic conditions. And of course, if you further think about economic democracy, relating also to inter and transnational relations. And again, it's about the spirit, it's about the structure, formal structure, and it's about the actual practice of negotiating different and antagonistic, sometimes antagonistic interests on multiple levels. Caring with can be regarded as a generic principle for it. It would require, but it also would foster structural inclusion. And there are lots of examples, although they are marginalized from the care sector in a bit broader sense. First of all, you can think about trade unions that are pursuing organizing strategies that are forms of caring with workers about their concerns. You can think about care councils, about co-determination at universities that sometimes exist. You can think about hospital pharmaceutical co-ops, community health organizations, home care co-ops, intergenerational housing co-ops, and so forth and so forth. But of course, the bigger question is really whether such examples, such strategies, such concepts could help us to democratize the economy through care on a broader scale, so that social economy is no longer kind of a separate sector, and the caring logic is not relegated to kind of a niche or emergency situations, but really becomes a structuring role for how economic activities are organized and performed. Thanks a lot for the attention.
So thank you very much, Andrea, for your presentation. When I look at the chat, I can see the first question, which comes from Günther Lorenz from TechNet Berlin, and he asks a question regarding replacing market. Does that just mean non-monetarized relationships? Which concept of market do you use? And is there a so-called social market in your view, Andreas? Please ask your questions and put them in the chat. So, Andreas.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's, of course, a core question where we talk about social relationships on a conceptual level. Market transactions leave no trace of a social relationship behind. but require social relationships, which they, if you like, thrive upon, exploit, instrumentalize. People need to grow up in households, learning a lot of skills, how to relate to other people, how to build social relationships to be able to function on markets. But the usual market transaction as such can be completely dehumanized. On financial markets, investments are placed through algorithms. You don't need a human being for a market transaction. That already illustrates that market transactions are something very alien to social relationships, to the very logic of how people create social ties. Because the social ties rest on obligations, on debt, if you like, on debt that cannot be cancelled. A market transaction cancels a debt once and for all, and thus there is no social tie involved. Some people appreciate that, but we also know about the problems of this kind of logic. But I would say that this is a very fundamental conceptual distinction between, social relationships on the one hand and market transactions on the other. So there's also a terminological difference included between social relationships and social relations, if you like, which is not always acknowledged. But of course, there are further issues associated with that kind of argument, and you might raise another question or critical comment, and we can pursue that discussion. Coming to your last question, is there a so-called social market in your view? That's an interesting question indeed. Can markets be socially re-embedded? Yes, I think. In principle, yes. I mean, an obvious example would be a local exchange trade network, which is a socially re-embedded market, if you like. Also, Karl Polanyi took great pains to emphasize that markets as such are not an invention of capitalism, but obviously, if you know a bit about economic history, markets existed for a very, very long time. But the point that Karl Polanyi makes is that these markets were strongly regulated socially, had limited functions. Hardly any social group depended on it vitally, and were thus always circumscribed, And famously, Karl Polanyi put great emphasis on the need to decommodify certain resources, if you like. He was talking about labor, money itself, and land that you can also interpret as nature. So in Polanyi's thinking, markets would still exist, can serve certain functions, but would be strongly regulated, subject to collective governance. That would be my preliminary answer to these questions, which are so important, and of course raise further questions.
Yeah, we continue with the next question, which is, to what degree do you think care as a principle and praxis can undo and transform power, structural inequalities in society, which feminists also mention?
That's right to the point again, now relating to care. Care is difficult as a concept, I think, and it's not only my take on it, but it's also, first of all, very important, and secondly, very fruitful, analytically and strategically. I mean, Tronto herself makes the point that care is often used to justify social domination and exploitation. For instance, she brings the example of colonialism. Colonialism was to a large part justified in terms of taking care of so-called uncivilized peoples. That's just one example. Some people like David Graeber and David Wengrow, in their last book before David Graeber died, they even formulate the hypothesis that social domination historically developed out of caring relations. And of course, from a feminist perspective, you know that care is a channel, is a vector, is a field of domination. So I think the important point is the type of care, obviously, that we're talking about. And here, I would really refer again to Tronto, and the emphasis on caring with. If you read the paper, actually it was a book contribution by Fisher and Toronto, 1990, on the phases of care, you immediately realize, okay, care is necessary for society, is very important, we should develop it further. But as it is practiced to a large part, is shot through unequal power relations, exploitation, all kinds of barriers for a, let's say, more encompassing care where no one loses, but everyone wins, if you like. So care, yes, is absolutely necessary as a principle and practice to undo and transform power and structural inequalities. But at the same time, it's part of them. At least that would be my take on it.
Yeah, Franziska Gömer says, if you understand the cooperative spirit as crucial to achieve organizational democracy, how can we create such a spirit? She thinks of specific skills which individuals but also collective groups would need, as well as structural aspects like democratic principles. And how can we transfer this spirit to the whole society?
Wow. Also a very good question, but I think this question is really difficult to answer or to, well, formulate an idea on how that could happen. One way is perhaps to use material benefits that people experience in many social economy organizations and approaches with that kind of spirit. In the sense of like people realize practically and not through moral rhetorics, that people realize practically that in order to achieve material benefits, let's say in a cooperative, it's just necessary to listen to each other. Otherwise, the organization breaks down. I remember even one person, a very experienced person from a cooperative federation in Austria. We were talking on the phone and he said, look, if there is a problem with a member cooperative of our federation, it's usually not about, you know, the economy in some kind of, in a conventional sense. It's usually about social things. And so you see, if people understand that, for instance, a properly working cooperative needs this kind of spirit, perhaps they are more open to counseling, to supervision, to draw attention to this atmosphere, which often goes unnoticed, which is not acknowledged, which is not properly developed. So we are again, of course, talking about care, what to care about and for in an organization, and how to disseminate that in a more broader sense through society. Yeah, well, that's a very big question. But of course, if you think about social movements, last point on that, they can, I think at least, it's my perception, they can raise, first of all, the topic of solidarity, of a cooperative spirit, if you like. And they can also create structures where people experience that cooperative spirit. And Weber et al., for instance, drew attention to the fact that most probably organization democracy fosters pro-social orientations, pro-democratic orientations. So these spaces of solidarity, of cooperative spirit, might shape the subjectivity of people. And there is some research on that, and we need more of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Andreas. Yeah, I think we can move on to the second part of our webinar now, with presentations from Barbara Sack and Nasik Beshienali. And I'd like to introduce the two speakers to you now. Barbara Sack is a senior economic researcher and director of CIRIEC, International Center of Information and Research on Public, Social and Cooperative Economy, as well as the Secretary General of CIRIEC Belgium. She has been active in the field of public enterprises and services of general and collective interest for 35 years now. And more recently, her research interests focus on solidarity, social economy issues, and social services, as well as on social and societal utility. Nazik Beshenali is a research associate at KU Leuven in Belgium and an adjunct professor of strategic management at the Brussels School of Governance. Her research explores how organizations such as social and cooperative enterprises create social and economic change. She has an extensive policy advisory background, working with United Nations agencies, national governments, and business associations on social and economic development strategies. She holds a master's and PhD in economics from Université Grenoble-Alpes in France, as well as a second master's degree in public policy from the University of Oxford. Barbara and Nazik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcus, and I hope you can meanwhile see my screen. Since I do not see you anymore, thanks for letting me know.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and I try to put it full screen, but it's lame in moving, so I hope it will come. Yeah, there it is. So, KU Leuven and CIRIEC are the two Belgian partners in the DICES project. And as Marcos explained it at the beginning, all partners from all countries are cooperating in this project. So we have very different strands of studying analysis, but all national parties, let's put it like this, also have something to say and to bring in. And here we will make a spotlight on Belgium. And so we will divide this in 3 parts. So Nazik and myself, we will speak each of us 10 minutes, and then there will be a general exchange and discussion. And then I would also like to point, sorry I went too fast, I would also like to point my excuses and apologies to the Belgian participants around the table, and especially to the Belgian partners in the team, because the presentation, my part at least, that I will present now, is really on a draft mode on the Belgium social economy ecosystem and its functioning. It's because I did not have the time to share this sketch. It's really a sketch and a very big summary. And as Andreas puts it, in the social economy sector, we really have a tradition of sharing, discussing, analyzing together, making changes back and forth before improving such slides, 2 slides that I will share you now. So really, for the Belgians around the table, I am open to your comments in order to improve what I just prepared here. So this is a sketch from the point of view from a practitioner. So the idea is really to try to give you a flavor of what exists in Belgium. So Belgium is a country where social economy exists really since the end of the 19th century. It has developed over time, but it has got a big upheaval, I would say, in the mid-80s, 1980s. And since then, there have been, this will be the second slide, a big movement in order to institutionalize social economy. And what you see here, and what I will shortly explain you, is all the ecosystem and the supportive structure that you can find as a practitioner. And I will go through all those boxes. And please put yourself in a mind, if you were a social economy entity that you would like to spread, and you would like to create another one, another company or another entity. Or you are an entrepreneur, you have an idea and you want to concretize it and operationalize it. Or you are a group of people within a territory, a community, in your village or in your district, city district, and you wish to develop a service. So these are three ideas, three possibilities, and this is very much the case all over Belgium, I would say every day. So in Belgium, we really have the chance that we have a lot of federations and entities where you can go to. So we have the sectoral federation, as Andreas explained it. There are very different legal families, cooperatives, mutual, association, foundations, and social enterprises also. And for the first one that exists in Belgium since the end of the 19th century, you can go to one of those federations to seek for help. Then on the right-hand upper corner, you have a lot of federations that are dealing either with an activity sector or with employment issue, also inclusion. So in many different sectors, and there are surely more that I forgot, you have now, today, a federation. So even in real estate, if you want to create a cooperative, a housing cooperative, you have a federation that will help you to set up the statutes, to help you to find finances, investment partners, and so on, to help you to present what is necessary on a legal base, insurance base, and so on. Then we have two levels in the middle, left and right, of bodies that will observe the sectors from a statistical point of view, from a research point of view. And those observatories, research centers, have done a lot to promote the idea of social economy, have done a lot on the communication aspects. And then we also have other support structure that can be either transversal or thematic. For example, WISES, so work integration, social economy enterprises, but also federations that deal more with disabled persons, business incubators, federations that deal only with innovation aspects. And then we have training, a lot of training that is provided by those federations in the different boxes that you have here. And then you have also practitioners, federation of various kinds that can help you to create something like this. And so it is really something that was developed over time. And you have to know that in Belgium there are 3 different regions that have 3 different regional laws and 3 different definitions. Sometimes Belgium is quite complex. And so Wallonia, Brussels and Flanders don't have the same supportive bodies, also because of their law. We have strategic action plans, programs, support scheme, financed projects, and they are organized either by the regional public administration and or by the regional governments and parliaments. And so in blue are the supportive legal frameworks. That is nowadays the base of this ecosystem. This ecosystem on a legal from a legal point of view was initiated first in Wallonia. And in fact, the Wallonian definition was then somehow the base for the European definition and then for the worldwide UN definition and ILO definition. And so various bodies were foreseen by law and regulation, and some of those bodies now have a real space in the consultative and economic and legal decision-making process. So this is on the bottom right of your screen. And so we have three groups of structures, institutional structures, where social economy today has a legal and recognized place. For instance, in the economic, social, and environmental councils. Environmental is associated depending on the region in Belgium. We also have really numerous quasi-public bodies that are installed by law or regulation and that help from an investment point of view or from a financial point of view. And I would say that this has really promoted social economy in Belgium. And we also have the so-called accredited social economy consultancy agency that are also there to support, in addition to my previous slides, all the bodies. And what is extremely important to understand in Belgium, it's the people. So in the middle, you have the people. All this would not have been possible if people would not have come together at one point in history and time to discuss all this. And so all the arrows in the different colors are back and forth discussion, dialogues between the person and the person that's present or that embed the social economy in Belgium really have interaction, constant interaction, daily interaction in the different arrows that you can see. And what is very important in Belgium, it's a small country, is that the social economy actors can really have a voice and a weight to modify laws if need be, and to interact with the different bodies that are installed. And it's an ecosystem that is permanently evolving. And so in this ecosystem, the discussion and the interaction are the most important, I would say, and democratic participation is on a very high level in Belgium. And this is what Nazik will now depict somewhat further. Nazik, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for putting a context for contextualizing us, and I think all our listeners and viewers now are very knowledgeable of how things are organized in Belgium. So I will be building on Barbara's presentation, and today's presentation is very practice-based, but still, in order to get started, I will just walk you through my understanding of the differences between economic democracy, industrial democracy, organizational democracy, and workplace democracy. And I think one of the main contributions of this DICES project was really a work at this conceptual level to make sense of how these different forms of democracy play out and come together in the end. And uploads are to Marcus and Andreas for making this conceptual report. I think it will be also available. So I will be building on their work to make sense of or to present the Belgian case. So the way how it's framed in the understanding of the differences of different forms of democracy, that the economic democracy is all encompassing. It encompasses the national level, sectoral level, organizational and workplace level democracies. And while industrial level is more at industry or sector level, organization is at organizational, and then it narrows down to workplace level. So the idea is that we build on two sets of criteria. The first one that I just mentioned. It's about the scope of democratic practices, like whether you practice it at all levels or at certain level, and whether that level is at sector or organization or workplace level. That's one way of making sense of this. And the second one is more substantive, in a sense, how this democracy is practiced by citizens, by workers, in a way. So whether these are like, we cannot probably compare the way how we as a citizens participate in the democratic governance at the national level. It won't be the same as if we talk about the economic bicameralism or co-determination models at the level of organization. So it's really about the depth of engagement. And one thing is clear, it requires a lot of research and furthering this conceptual understandings. And I saw that among our participants, lots of researchers, students. So I think it gives lots of food for thought for your further research. So maybe the next slide, because today we will be talking about the economic democracy, specifically. In this project, we actually work more at organizational level democracy, but today's presentation is about economic democracy. Barbara, do you mind changing?
I have some issues in going on with the slide, so I will stop sharing and then share again. 1 second.
So in the meanwhile, I will keep talking maybe. So the economic democracy is really, it has a political agenda as it aims to reorganize the economy so that people and nature come first before profit, and it promotes collective decision-making over what is produced, how, and for whom. So in the report, of course, there are like the historical roots go probably in very different intellectual traditions. Here it was framed mostly as like we had a preliminary like a discussion about whether it's grounded in Polanyi's, but of course, like there are so many different ways of framing it. I personally like the framing of Carol Bateman, where organizations act as schools of democracy, and they train basically their employees in participatory models of governance. Because the argument there is that workers do not stop being citizens while they work. So it has some different traditions. And depending also, I think, the regions and the countries, it can be also grounded in different conceptual traditions. Well, today it has a very important, its importance actually also comes from the rising inequalities and concentration of economic power, and also like a broader geopolitical processes that also question increasingly the democratic values as such. So I will be focusing today about how democracy could be practiced at different levels, because it operates across multiple levels and at organizational, sectoral, and national level. So maybe next slide, Barbara, if you don't mind.
If it works.
Yeah. Otherwise, I can retrieve my slide, but
I will do again, and I'm sorry, technical problem.
Oh, okay. Otherwise,
No,
do you want me
I will get it. Just a second.
And so in Belgium, I think Belgium represents a very I don't know for all of the countries, but I think Belgium is one of the examples of how economic democracy is practiced at different levels. So we have typically practices that are at national and transnational, regional levels, also like at the EU level, where participation results in the outcomes and the policy outcomes regarding the employment, investment, redistribution, tax policies, and regulations. So examples typically include the for example, there are mechanisms like automatic wage indexation that have been also negotiated conditions to ensure that salaries are regularly adjusted to inflation, protecting workers' purchasing power without requiring constant renegotiation. Also for the firms with more than 50 employees, the Committee for Prevention and Protection at Work ensures that workers' involvement in issues related to health, safety, and well-being. And these are the arrangements actually how which show how economic democracy in Belgium create like a structured forms of participation and protections that extend from workplace basically to the national level of economic governance. Also, at the sectoral and regional level, economic democracy can take the form of coordination between firms, workers, and other stakeholders. And there are lots of cases of sectoral collective bargaining where wages or working conditions are negotiated between employer organizations, trade unions at the level of an industry. Workers, for example, of a same sector will benefit from relatively uniform standards and thus strengthening their collective influence that goes beyond their organizational like arrangements. And also at the organizational level, we can talk about also work councils and trade unions, but also there are many ways of direct participation where, I mean, like there are a spectrum of ways how employees can participate actually in the decision making of their organization, which can be there have been many articles like distinguishing these different ways. Like it can be literally ranging from economic bicameralism to like occasional consultations of the workers. So I think there can be different ways. And also I think that one of the best illustrative cases are the cooperatives. Also, I must say, not all cooperatives are automatically democratic, although they are so by their ownership structure and governance model. But one thing is being a structure, another thing is living these values and practices. So the next slide is about the case of EcoPower, which is a Belgian cooperative, which was founded in 1991 in Flanders by a small group of citizens who wanted to actively produce sustainable energy. And with the liberalization of Flemish electricity market in 2000, EcoPower obtained a license and could deliver actually direct electricity to its members. And it has become a full energy provider. So from then, cooperative has been taking lots of decisions like building wind turbines in locations such as Eeklo, Ghent, Gistel, and Asse, developed hydroelectric installations in Overijse and Rotselaar. It installed hundreds of decentralized solar panels on schools and private homes, and today its membership pool is over 60,000 individual members, in which means that all these decisions were taken collectively by these members. And so at the organizational level, they practice this cooperative one person, one vote model, where every member has to purchase a share to the like to the extent of the knowledge I have, it's 20 shares per person. So it is really different from practicing like from taking decisions or like in participating in the decisions in an investor-owned firm. And although there can be issues with member participation, whether they are interested in taking decisions, in the case of EcoPower, I think it's very much stimulated by the fact that all members have a stake and interest in following up what's happening with their organization. So the participation is quite active. And then another remarkable point of EcoPower is that they have established in 2011 a European Federation of Renewable Energy Cooperatives, which is called RESCOPS. And today it has a network of 2,500 energy cooperatives across 25 European countries. And they bring together around 2 million citizens who are also involved in the community energy projects, and they are governed also by their General Assembly, and then also they practice democracy at the inter-organizational level, representing their organizations, but on the basis of the same one member, one vote basis. And also, interestingly, at the national levels, they have been also successful at securing some of the important policies, such as the EU directives, promoting citizen-led energy systems at the EU level, but also at the level of Belgian legislation. And for example, they have introduced the very concept of renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities into the EU's Clean Energy for All European package in 2019. So this kind of participation is also an illustrative case of how economic democracy is practiced at from bottom-up organizational level, inter-organizational level, and also at the national, regional level. Of course, the whole process of participation is not straightforward and probably not so smooth, but I think these kind of cases are very inspirational and shows that this model is a working model. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know exactly how to start the discussion. I will look at the question and read them with you because I couldn't see them beforehand. So based on the current state of your analysis, can you say something yet about the extent to which the Belgian social economy organization benefit from structure designed specifically to strengthen social innovation, or about the relationship between such structure and these organizations? In Flanders, the Sociale Innovatiefabrik and the ESF Competence Center based there, which presumably fall under the mentioned category of quasi-public bodies that support the social economy. Yes, for sure, yes, the answer is. So all social economy structure, and as Nazik really put it with the EcoPower example, benefit from one another. So even in between structures and organization, there are contacts to strengthen each other and to support each other, because here the question is more to what extent it supports and strengthens social innovation. I would say that we have a lot of possibilities and moments to exchange between actors and players of the social economy, and also to exchange latest information and to discuss about a strategy how to best improve innovation. So you can have many different aspects of innovation, including process innovation, social innovation. And I would say really that every 2 weeks I am invited, me as a research body, to participate in such discussion and exchanges. And I'm based in Liège, in the French-speaking part of Belgium, in Wallonia, but we also have places where we can discuss with the other regions. And to give you also an example of at European level, in February 24 Belgium was holding the chair of the European Union, and we organized a social economy conference in Liège. And as I said, Belgium is organized in 3 regions, and during the 6 months of Belgian presidency, the social economy conference was the single only event co-organized by the 3 regions and the federal government all together. So social economy could bring together all those public bodies, all those support organizations to organize a European conference in one region. So voilà. Nazik, I give you the floor maybe for the second and probably the third question.
So the second question is, could stakeholder capitalism be seen as a form of economic democracy? Okay, and the third question is, which weaknesses would you see regarding the social economy in Belgium? How this, it's probably your question. Okay. So stakeholder capitalism, I think it's definitely a form of, like, it depends also how you define it, but I think engaging various stakeholders in the decision making at the level of at the societal level, it's definitely a way of participation. But from there, I would be cautious to say like whether it's an economy, it's a form of economic democracy, because to me, then it has to have like institutionalized arrangements that assesses the power balances, so everyone has an equal say, and the processes. So, and then also I think participation is not only about the formal aspects, right? That everyone kind of takes part in this participatory processes, but also the substantive aspects, like what we are being democratic for, like what are the outcomes of these democratic decisions. So I think it depends, but probably my colleagues here, maybe Andreas, will have more extensive answer to your question. Yeah.
And if I go to the third question from Andreas, which weaknesses would you see regarding social economy in Belgium, and how could these be remedied, tackled strategically? Well, there are some. We have to be honest. I would say that one weakness is that we have reached a certain stage level where we absolutely need to go out and convince people that are not yet convinced that this alternative model of doing business can be forwarded to further sectors and to new sectors. But the weakness are threefold, I would say. As I said, it was in the mid-80s that many social economy endeavor ideas were created and developed and so on. And there is now, since 2, 3, 4 years, a full generation of people that is going into pension. Many social economy people do work in their enterprise for till 80, 85 years old, but we need to convince youngsters to step in and to get hold and take those social economy organizations to manage them and to move them on. So this is one weakness, because youngsters today, they prefer to pop from one idea to the other, and it's very difficult to find people that are okay, eager, and that will commit themselves for at least 5, 6 years, because you need 1 or 2 years at least to really get engaged in the management level of an organization. And so this is one difficulty. The second difficulty is that in Belgium and in several regions we had a big turn in the government composition. It was an election in June 24, and so the current governments are not so eager to support the ecosystem. So that's really a difference that all managers, actors, players, observers in the social economy note in the 3 regions. And by chance, I was looking this noon for the Flemish Minister of Social Economy to get a contact at her cabinet. And I noticed that among the some 30 people in her cabinet, no one explicitly had social economy in his task. Many collaborators had inclusion, environment, sustainable development, social justice, etc., but no one to be one single reference person for social economy. So this is also a difficulty, that we now have so many laws, so many support systems, but we need to go to our governments to say, please don't break this ecosystem. Please go on supporting it and finding people to dialogue with. So this is the second level I think we need to promote. And the final level, I would say, is to engage in new sectors. We have difficulties currently to engage in new sectors, for example, cultural and creative economies. There's a lot going on, a lot of social innovation going on, and we need to better structure initiative, be it in the music sector, in press, the press sector, in the digital sector. So for example, the trade unions are doing a lot in Belgium to support digital platform workers, but social economy is not yet sufficiently behind to develop economically sustainable models. So we have to think of new ideas to have a better financial base, I would say. And another question is, how can we promote benefits in an international level? Well, I would say that unfortunately at European level we have the same political issues than at Belgium level, but we still have some discussion places, although for instance DG GROW dropped out of the GECES. GECES is a group of experts in social economy that discuss together. But so it is reduced now more to the inclusion aspect of social economy and less to the entrepreneurship and economic aspect. So this is a problem. We also have, we made big steps at UN level and ILO level. Unfortunately, with all the ILO budget crisis and also at the UN level, the current geopolitical crisis that we face brings social economy somewhat back in the agenda. But for instance, in Spain is doing a lot. I think the Spanish government is really supporting, I think, alone all over Europe, social economy, and exports the model to Latin America. We are at several international federation, GSEF, Social and Solidarity Economic Forum, International Forum, CIRIEC. We work more and more with Asia and with Africa. In Africa, there's a lot going on social economy and social innovation. So voilà, those are some answers. If I move, I try to read and answer at the same time. Andreas will comment on stakeholder capitalism. How would you assess policy? I more or less answered Andreas. I will go to Constance or Constance, Connie. I'm a sociologist, and the mention of the outcome of democratic processes leads me to wonder about negative outcomes. Nazik, maybe this is more for you. I read the question. I'm thinking, of course, of the current spread of right-wing politics in the democratic society and the possibility of analogous outcomes on the scales of these types of democracies, economic, organizational. Barbara's comment just now on the sort of selectivity of participants in these initiatives makes me think that perhaps such issues do not arise because there is a clear selection bias towards folk already inclined towards these values. Yes, I agree. Anyway, I'd love to hear the presenters' thoughts on this. Before I give the floor to Nazik, I would just point out to one communication campaign that stakeholder federations in French-speaking part of Belgium did. So we had spots on TV, on radio and newspapers, on bus stops every week. So every week we could seek a place or spot to present some ideas and some communication on social economy, and that worked quite well. As in Germany, they made a big campaign to favor public services. So if you make a huge campaign in everyday life, media content, and you do this every week, after a year or year and a half of this, there is an outcome. There is a possibility to spread the ideas, but this takes time and money. Nazik?
Yes, I will be very brief because I think it goes a bit beyond the conversation. Like it's more about the more democratic processes at the state and probably at the international level. But generally speaking, when I was talking about like democratic outcomes, it was specifically about the in democratic values as practiced in social economy organizations, like which is here I would less talk about the which probably logically would join the same thinking that whether democratic decisions, whether they have anti-democratic outcomes, whether they are still okay. And I think we have many cases in cooperatives as well where they democratically decided to demutualize, which is still a decision that has been taken democratically, right? But then here I was more implying about these democratic values, whether when we look at the democratic decision, whether they still uphold these participatory values, the values of inclusion, of equality. And in that sense, I think the democratic process is substantiated by its outcomes as well. So it was in this sense, but happy to leave the floor to Andreas, who has more political level ideas, I think, on this issue.
Yeah, first on stakeholder capitalism. I think one further problem, I don't yeah, I don't know if that's now really adding to what you said, Nasik, but it's worth emphasizing. I mean, capitalism, the notion of capitalism puts capital before people, obviously. So that's not compatible at all with organization democracy. And it rather would lead to the problems that Constanze was pointing towards, perhaps. Yeah. For instance, in Catholic social thinking, you have the counter notion of laborism, emphasizing that capitalism means towards another end, to the well-being of at least humans or non-humans nowadays. Well, that's on that. And Constanze, yeah, a very interesting question. I did quite some research on community gardens. They want to be inclusive, but they're not in Vienna. They overrepresent, let's say, a left-leaning, green, alternative milieu. So they have some hidden mechanisms, you know, related to habitus, for instance, excluding people practically, although they want to include them. And I think there is the phenomenon of what you could call defensive cooperativism. There is the notion of defensive localism, but you perhaps could translate that to cooperatives, you know, people, the in-group defending its privileges if a cooperative is running well. I think these phenomena can be observed. You know, think about Mondragon Corporación Cooperativa, cooperative cooperation, if you like, very complex, a very interesting, inspirational, impactful organization. But nevertheless, I mean, people even go so far to criticize the Mondragon cooperative cooperation in terms of subsidizing jobs in the Basque Country by exploiting firms in low-wage countries. That was the internationalization strategy. Barbara has a different opinion, so that's food for debate. But it's a fact that they acquired firms in low-wage countries to survive in competition, and there even were happening strikes. So, well, anyways, that's kind of a criticism that may point to that comment of Constanze.
Yeah.
And it really pertains to the quality of care, you know, because care in itself can be good, but can be bad. That's my take on it. So it's really, first of all, about the, you know, sensitivity and scope of attentiveness. I mean, in political terms, one of the first issues and problems is the we. Who is the sovereign? Who is the we? Who decides about the we? Is it just the usual in-group of already privileged people or not? That's a very, very complicated matter. And we would need much more time to discuss it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can come to the end. Pardon me?
To add something.
Yes,
okay.
I would personally also like question whether, like, living in a capitalist society, we can still practice economic democracy. And to me, it's not like mutually excludable notions. But I was thinking, like, I'm not sure what is in which context a stakeholder capitalism is referred, like at national or like at organizational level. But at the organizational level, there have been some studies demonstrating that even in a privately owned capitalistic forms of democratic deliberation and stakeholder democracy can be practiced, which is, I think, also for me an important way of channeling, not only being kind of promoters, like to promote democratic values only in cooperatives and social economy organizations, but also beyond them. So I wouldn't be that categorical, probably. But I might be not expert of.
Okay, Barbara, do you want to add anything, or yeah? So first of all, thanks to all of the speakers for self-organizing the Q&A, since I unfortunately dropped out and had connection problems. Yeah, it's time to come to an end now. I hope you gained valuable insights and inspirations from this meeting. Thank you for all your questions, comments, feedback. If you want to dive deeper in the conceptual framework or in the astronomy, please check out the summer. Report will be available. You find us on https://dice-project.eu. And on our website, you can also subscribe to our newsletter. You find the upcoming events. Further webinars will be prepared. We already cordially invite you to participate and continue the exchange. Please also check out our publications on the website. So far, a working paper and a report have been published. The working paper assesses policy and regulatory frameworks shaping the social economy in Europe. And the second publication provides regional profile reports and deals with dimensions of social exclusion in selected case study regions. Please also follow DICES on LinkedIn. You find the link in the chat. And yeah, let me thank to all the speakers, Andreas, Barbara, Nasik. And please also let me thank Davide Durante from our partner DICES, who is in charge of the coordinating and monitoring the dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities of the DICES project, who helped us technically with his support and who is fostering collaborations among diverse stakeholders. Thanks to all the partners of the DICES project, to our networks, organizations, and all the persons who supported the promotion of this webinar. And last but not least, thank you so much for your time and participation. Have a good day, and let's keep in touch. Bye-bye.